We are backstage at the House of Blues. I am pinching myself because we have reached 50 interviews, and I am joined by, and I promise I do not say this about everyone, two of my absolute favorite artists, Tegan and Sara. Thank you so much for making the time for us today.
Thank you, and congratulations on 50.
I couldn't think of better people to celebrate it with.
At first, I thought you were going to say you did 50 interviews with us, and I was like, how is that possible?
I was going to say, well, we would have a lot to talk about, that's for sure.
You're like, I'm working across the country at 50 different publications. No, this is great. Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's also a special occasion because it's Halloween. So what was one of your favorite Halloween costumes, and what's your go-to Halloween candy?
Go-to Halloween candy when I was growing up definitely was chocolate bars for me. And we've been talking a lot about costumes because we're happy to report that most of our childhood costumes would be appropriate for today. I know a lot of people look back and go, wow, I could never do that again. But really, there's only one troubling year where we dressed as jailbirds. But I just, with my politics around the prison industrial complex, it's not a photo. I really want it on the internet.
Fair.
Agreed. Do you agree with all that? Yeah. Favorite though, there's a couple of pictures that we put out on the internet, and in one of them, Tegan is dressed as Oscar the Grouch, and I'm dressed as Big Bird, and I think it's pretty swell.
Exactly, your own little Sesame Street. Yeah. And then, so you guys are also 8 albums, which is incredible, each one with their own distinct flair sonically, and you each had sort of like a different style phase along with that. Since Halloween is all about dressing up, what was your favorite style that went along with an album?
Well, it's interesting because we posted online for people to hashtag TNS for Halloween and dress up as their favorite era of Tegan and Sara, and pretty much everyone exclusively is just posting photos of themselves in striped black and white t-shirts with short hair, which was basically sainthood, I guess. So I guess that's everyone else's favorite era. I'd like to think that probably starting with sainthood, we started to get better hair. So I think anything on Sainthood, Heartthrob was a great era. I think this era is doing pretty good for us in terms of hair and style. I think we found our own kind of thing. Those first few years / the first 10 years was tough for us. Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's one of the things I appreciate with y'all is 8 albums, each sort of distinct, each sort of evolving each time. How important was that to you that you evolve with your audience as you kept making music? Was it something you were conscious of?
I don't even know if it was conscious. I think it's just sort of probably speaks more to who we are as people. We're sort of always changing things up, and we're very I don't know, we're curious, and we're interested in different types of music and different types of aesthetics. And I think at some point it did become sort of like a more organized approach, I guess you could say, but a lot of it just sort of came about organically. A lot of the earlier part of our career feels a bit foggy to me as well, because things aren't as documented, and we didn't have the internet, and if we did have the internet, it was you uploaded pictures once a month to your MySpace page. It wasn't something that we were using with great frequency initially, and so we sort of were doing things without a sort of long-term strategy, whereas now we will sit down and say, okay, for this record, let's really try to go with a different producer or different sounds, or let's not try to copy all the same keyboards we used on this last record. And the same goes for our look. We're always trying to sort of break new ground visually for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And then we were just talking about the set list a little bit earlier. When you do have such a large body of work, how do you go about making a set list for a tour?
Well, in some cases, we quite literally just go to iTunes or Spotify or whatever, look and see what the most popular songs are. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately we always want to give people the best show that we possibly can, which means playing the songs they want to hear. So a lot of the set is just, what we consider fan favorites or songs that have been hits or singles. But we always try to throw stuff in there that we think they may not have heard. Right now we're playing 24 songs, and only 8 of them are off the new record. So there's a lot of old music. So we spend a lot of time sort of updating the sounds of those older songs so they fit into the set a little more cohesively. And my hope is that for a lot of the new fans who came on board for Heartthrob, that it's introducing them to the rest of our catalog. Mm-hmm. But in an interesting way. It's not a flashback. We're not up there being and now we're gonna play the old songs. They fit in the set as if they're new songs. So I think it's pretty cool.
Perfect. And then, when was the last time you guys sat down, other than Love You to Death, and listened to one of your albums, all the way through? And what did you notice? What did you pick up on?
I definitely haven't sat down and listened to a full record, but I do occasionally go back into the archive. Sometimes it's just because I'm refreshing myself for a tour, or recently I actually went back and listened to a bunch of The Con, purely because I hear so often how it's people's favorite album. And it's funny because, when we actually were touring The Con and we're like that was a current record. People didn't say that. It comes after. It's like once a record sort of has to become something beloved over time. It doesn't come out day one and people say like, this is the most beloved album of Tegan and Sara. It's like it really does take a long time. And so when we were touring the con, I don't remember thinking it was a popular record, but I don't remember thinking it was particularly like a fan favorite, even compared to So Jealous. But anyway, somebody recently was talking about how it's like a beloved Tegan and Sara record, and I was like, okay, I can't even name I can't even name all the songs on that record anymore. Like, it's certainly not my beloved record. So I went back and I listened to all the songs that I didn't remember were on the record, like Floor Plan of My Head and Heart and Knife Going In, and I was like, so basically all my songs, and I was like, these are weird. You can't tell me that somebody's out there listening to this and thinking it's their beloved song. Like, there's great songs on that album. Like 19 is fantastic. Back in Your Head, we still play to this day. I think that I Was Married, we're playing for probably the first time since we toured the con, and I love playing that song. But there's some pretty wacky songs on that record that I still question if people are really actually listening to them all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that actually spawns an interesting follow-up. If the con is not your beloved record, what would you say the beloved record is?
I don't think I have one.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm starting to think less in terms of albums and more about like what music just really still connects to me and resonates with me. And I just think from like purely from an artistic songwriting perspective, there are just songs from all the different albums that I really, really enjoy. Like, for example, Sainthood is a really tough record for me, but there are songs on that record that I really love. So I would never write Sainthood off like as a record I don't like. It's just, for me, I don't know. It's more complicated than that. Mm-hmm. For a fan, I get it. You get that one album and it can mean those were the years you were in high school, or those were your first 2 years of college, or, whatever. So I get that you're listening to it in a very different way than I am.
Totally. So Jealous is definitely senior year of high school for me, which is one of my favorite records of all time. But when you guys first came into the music industry, some of the best advice that I've heard that you were given is you'll make your best records when you're in your 30s and 40s. Do you find that that's true, and why?
Well, we've made 2 records now in our 30s, Heartthrob and now Love You to Death, and I do think that, from a songwriting perspective, like they are the strongest, most cohesive records that we've made. I agree with that advice still. I think the advice came from a place of like, don't put so much pressure on yourself to excel in your 20s. Like, use your 20s to educate yourself and learn and, discover the world and hone your craft. And I think that it was almost like it was fatherly advice. Like, it was, came from Neil Young's manager, Elliot Roberts, and it was sort of like, I think he was telling us basically to settle down, not put so much pressure on ourselves. We were so terrified of disappointing people. First couple of years that we were out in the business, it was a real wake-up call. We weren't going to be some big, massive band. We were going to have to be out there and winning fans over one by one. So I think he was mostly giving us the, like, you don't have to conquer the world in a day, kind of advice. And I'd stand by that. I think that was good advice.
Certainly. Now, you both have been known as sort of activist artists. Where do you get the flair for activism, as much as I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but like, where did that social mission sort of come from?
I mean, some of it definitely was just growing up with a mother who was an activist. She was in college when we were in elementary school, and she was on campus, and she was, she's a feminist, and she was working in, she was doing social work, but she worked in the mental health community and worked with people who had been sexually assaulted or were working in the sex trade. And so we were very informed at a young age about things that were going on in the world that probably a lot of people our age weren't. Mm-hmm. And I think that it just meant that I think that we had a lot of empathy, and we learned really early on that showing up and doing marches or going to lectures or reading about things and educating yourself about things was an important part of being a good person. And I think when we started our music career, there wasn't necessarily an obvious tie-in right away to activism. I think that, again, came over years of recognizing that our audience, there was a real intense core fan base that was LGBTQ, and that they had things that we could sort of, I guess, like, be good allies or support, even when sometimes the issues didn't particularly resonate with us. Like, for example, the biggest one, maybe, marriage equality. I remember when that movement started, I was in my early 20s, and I was very much comfortable with the idea that I would never get married, and I didn't take it necessarily even that personal that it wasn't legal. And once I sort of recognized that people in my community were really struggling with this, people who were older, people who were being exempt from things that straight couples took for granted, whether it was, hospital visits or adoption or children's rights or benefits or, recognition in the military. I recognized, like, okay, maybe even though marriage equality it's not my sort of, like, I don't know, it's not something that I care about. I recognize that it was important that we get involved. And so that sort of started around 2006, 2007. And since then, it's just been like, okay, we are actually, I think that we are role models, and I think that we are equipped to deal with, some of the feedback that we get when we're out doing outreach with our fans and stuff. And I just think, like, we would be just dicks to not, be getting involved and helping out whenever possible. And we actually kind of really enjoy it now and take a lot of, I don't know, like, this sort of adds this, like, really special part to our business. Like, we're not just out here playing songs and selling T-shirts. Like, we are out here kind of a part of a community and supporting a community and feeling really proud of the community that we're a part of.
And that sort of brings me to an interesting point. I remember I was listening to an interview where you said that when you're looking for producers or people to collaborate with, you're looking for people that respect women as artists and writers. And I think that people, when they think of the music industry, they don't think as much the sexism end of it, but it's certainly prevalent. I mean, how difficult is it even today to find people that respect women as artists and writers when you're looking to collaborate?
Well, I mean, I think things have improved a lot, certainly even since we started in the business in 1997. I think that there were, huge parts of our career where we didn't feel that respected by the media or by specifically male writers, like the way they would write about our music. It was often very much focused on our image, and there was a natural instinct to sort of anesthetize ourselves to that and just kind of downplay it, because I think we were fearful of sounding like complaining, or we didn't want to challenge anyone. And I think some of the people who worked for us didn't want us to challenge the media on that either. And I would say that has been one of the biggest changes that we've seen, is the way that women are talked about in the major publications has definitely changed. I think there's more respect for women now, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think there's still just, like, inherently in our society a lot of skepticism and lack of respect for women sometimes when it comes to music. I mean, people are very quick to call every male who is successful in our industry a genius. But with women, they just don't get that tag. They don't get called that very often. Again, I think there's just some skepticism, like, oh, well, her record's really amazing. Who wrote it? Oh, her record's really amazing. Even with us, people will be like, oh, Greg Kurstin, he really, like, transformed you guys. And it's like, there's a natural instinct to want to be like, well, come listen to my demos, because it's like, we put a lot of our ideas down there. Greg is incredible, and that's why we collaborated with him, but we chose him. It's not like, we were, like, out on the streets and he found us, and I think that's why we loved working with Greg, was he was constantly like, you guys are fantastic. You're great writers. You're great performers. What you do is super interesting. And those kinds of collaborations, I think, definitely bolster Sarah and I and make us feel really good about what we're doing. And, I think it's easy now to succeed as a woman in this industry if you want to be a writer and producer and whatever, but you have to find the right people. Like, I think, it's about finding the right people who really believe in you. And I'm sure there are probably dark corners of our industry that are still pretty rampant with awful kind of stuff when it comes to women, so...
Well, I could certainly talk to you both about this for hours, but you have a show to play, and I'm not going to keep people make people wait. So just who are you guys listening to? Just what's your favorite album, and then I'll let you go.
All right, this is Tegan, and I'm going to say that probably lately the thing that kind of moved me most, a couple weeks ago, I was just listening to Spotify playlists, and Francis and the Lights record, Farewell Starlight, came on, and I love it. It sounds like Phil Collins to me, and I'm just so blown away by that. Love the record.
I am listening to a lot of Shura, who we actually had out supporting our tour. She's from the UK. She's a twin. She's adorable. She's a great writer. She made a really cool pop record, a really smart pop record. I listen to that a lot.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much, and have a great show.
Thank you. Thanks for your questions.